Hi. So it's been a long time since I've done a book review, so let's get into it. I haven't done book reviews only because the few books that I've read have kind of boggled my mind in the sense that I feel like I am a little uninformed to review it even though I read the book. So the first book I'm going to go through is The Third Reich by Roberto Bolaño. Basically, The Third Reich covers a character named Udo Berger. He's a war games champion, and he goes on vacation with his girlfriend to Costa Brava. And on vacation, they meet another German couple. They hang out with them. They start hanging out with some locals. They have fun. And eventually, the boyfriend of the other German couple goes missing. Udo is on the case. Like, he's watching it, following it very closely. He goes to officials, he checks in. And all this time passes. I think maybe like a few days, a week or so passes, and the guy's girlfriend gives up. She goes back. Udo's girlfriend also goes back to Germany. And so he's basically left alone. And he's also, as well, playing this war game with a local, and it's called The Third Reich, hence the book's name. So initially, when I read the book, I had a lot of confusion, basically trying to understand, okay, what is the meaning of this book? For me, I'd like to know, is there a deeper meaning to this book? So I reviewed it on another account of mine, and someone mentioned that it was basically a book that covers the attitudes of people towards Germans after World War II, or how they perceive Germans or something like that. And it started to make a little bit of sense to me because there was a lot of passages and that Udo focused on, okay, that's not me, like I don't support the Third Reich, or blah. Like there were some snippets of writing like that. And basically the book is structured just like Udo's diary. I don't know why I said dictionary. Diary. So he's writing in his diary. You get a first person point of view on his experiences while he's on vacation and stuff. So there are many times in the book where I've seen passages where he's like, I didn't do those things, like I that's not me, like. And when somebody mentioned that to me, I was like, okay, that makes a lot more sense. Because also a lot of the book focuses on his strategy for the game, The Third Reich, and some passages I read were just like literally him writing down his strategy. And there were many passages where he talked about his day interacting with the locals, as well as his girlfriend, etc. So to me, when I read the book, it really just felt like kind of like a slice of life sort of thing. Like we're just getting kind of insight into this guy's life. There's not really a huge, yes, there is a plot and stuff like that, but I just, it didn't really seem too apparent to me. And I really believe it's because there's a cultural sort of gap that I am having with some of these world literature novels. And it's not because I don't know the history. I'm very familiar with World War II history, but I believe I'm not familiar with the social history at the time, considering, people's attitudes towards Germans, or, other people who are, part of the Axis powers or something. So it definitely confused me because there was some context that I was missing. Because the book itself wasn't written in a confusing way. It was very straightforward and it was interesting. But I just felt like there was something I was missing, which prevented me from really doing a review sooner. And I've tried to do some research. I think the best research I could do is possibly looking into the author's background. Sorry, this is Snoop. She's been very clingy, and when I talk, she lands on my head, so I'll just hold her here. But basically, this cultural gap, I was kind of hesitant to make a review because I just felt like, okay, I don't really know what the meaning of this book is, and it really hindered my interpretation of the book. But thankful to this anonymous, well, not anonymous, but random comment that I got, I understood the book more. So I would like to take a look at it with fresh eyes, maybe a year or some years later. I think I remember a little bit too much about it, so I'd like to take a look probably when I've forgotten a little bit about the book. Overall, I thought the book is very interesting, truthfully. I thought the book was something that I would recommend. Um, and it really was easy to read as well. It was definitely one of the more interesting stories that I've read which is why I picked it up. I've never heard anything similar to a plot like that, and the underlying cultural meaning is interesting as well. So, another book I wanted to talk about was A Private Affair by Beppe Fenoglio. It is an Italian book. It is about a man named Milton. He grows up in this Italian town in his hometown of Alba, and he is infatuated with this girl named Fulvia. And so he also has a best friend named Giorgio, and sometimes him and Giorgio, as well as by himself, would go to Fulvia's place, and he would recite poetry for her, and he would just do all these things because he was very infatuated with her. So he joins the effort to fight against Italian fascism, and it's not really given why he joins this effort, because he's not really seen as this sort of macho man to be a part of the war and stuff. It seems like he's obviously more interested in academia and literature. But he joins, and he comes across his hometown after, serving for a while. I think he's on patrol, and he runs into the maid that Fulvia had, because he was trying to visit her house, and he also, I think the maid was in there, and he comes across her. And so basically the maid tells him that Giorgio and his friend and Fulvia get together after he leaves for the military. I don't think they have necessarily a stringent relationship, like a strictly, boyfriend girlfriend, but they sleep together, and she's like, yeah, he was here all the time. And so Milton doesn't necessarily fly into a rage, but he's upset, and he decides, nothing matters anymore. I'm going to find Giorgio. And eventually he finds out from Giorgio's superiors, because I believe he looks for his they're split up to different groups. He is told that Giorgio was kidnapped by fascist forces. And so he's determined to find Giorgio and rescue him as well. So overall, we'll start with the basics. The book was written pretty straightforward. It wasn't confusing, and the story was mainly in Milton's point of view. I'm sorry, I always forget names, and I'm like pausing, so I apologize. So, for me personally, I was a little disappointed that even though this was in Milton, I'm so sorry. I am very tired. I worked late last night. Even though this was in Milton's point of view, I didn't really see too much or read too much of his emotion into this. Of course, there was mentioning of his, statements, and, I can derive some sort of assumption of how he's feeling. That's not rocket science. But I compared it to Beware of Pity, and, thinking about how the protagonist went into how he felt about certain things that happened in the book. And I was like, that's a shame that that's not the case with A Private Affair. Of course, I know every author is different. No book needs to have 5 pages on how you feel about something. But, he goes off to war. His best friend betrays him, because I'm sure his best friend knows that he's infatuated with Fulvia. And it just seems like a soul-crushing thing, because you're in this war that seems endless. I mean, it's called World War II. Obviously, it would feel endless. And, he's roughing it out. He's doing these missions and stuff like that, whatever he needs to do. And he's away from home. And the one thing he was looking forward to seeing, the one person he was looking forward to seeing, was practically stolen by his best friend. So, I don't know, I expected a little bit more emotion out of it, but it just felt like he described what he felt, but it felt surface level. It didn't feel like I could really connect with understanding him as a character. And, of course, I would not, relate to him in any way, but I feel like sometimes with with a deep dive into a character's emotions or something like that, I feel like a reader can connect. a little bit more to the story. So that was kind of disappointing on my end. I think I really wanted a little bit more of the emotional in there in his perspective. But it really just was more, a lot of the story was descriptors of of his journey, of, fog he came across, of a muddy hill that he was trying to, go over. And I don't know if there is a double meaning in that sense, where it just feels like in war you're doing so much but you're getting nowhere. I don't know. That was a maybe assumption I made. So, perhaps there is a meaning in that, perhaps not. I don't know. But I tried to do research on this book as well, and again, I didn't really come up with much. I tried to look on Goodreads as well with other people's reviews, but since this was a recently translated work, it looks like from 2023. Now, I don't know for sure. This was the copy of the book I got was a New York Review book, and they do a lot of translations of world literature as well, which is awesome. So I saw that they published it in 2023, so I don't know if it was technically the first translation of the book or if it was, a more recent translation of the book. Who knows? So, as a result, I saw most reviews in Italian, and some reviews just didn't really help me. So I feel like there is a sort of cultural insight that I'm missing. Maybe Italians' attitudes during the war, soldiers' attitudes during the war, on the Allied forces side. Or just like a general insight into, war it just seems endless. It just seems like there's no hope. And, Fulvio was his only hope, which is why he abandoned everything to pursue Giorgio. That is my interpretation on it. So I don't know if it's necessarily the correct interpretation. I know there are probably, probably evidence towards another interpretation that I am just not insightful enough to understand or realize, because, again, I feel like there is some context that I'm missing. But I do hope to do more research into the author's background as well, because, yeah, I just haven't had time. Like, I'm been busy. But yeah, overall, the point of this video was to kind of review the books, but also talk about how it is hard reading world literature, not because the writing is necessarily confusing or anything, or maybe the story is, cluttered or anything. It's mainly because it's just, there could be some cultural context missing, especially if it's a book that is placed in the 1940s or the 1960s, 70s. That's not a time where I was alive where I knew some of these attitudes that maybe other people in these other countries had. So I think that's the biggest hurdle, really, is missing some cultural context, which is kind of frustrating, and which is why I held off on making these reviews, because I'm like, oh, maybe I can research, but even research didn't pull up much. So I guess if anybody has read these books and they have a better point of view on it, I would be very glad and very happy to understand and listen and read your comments or something, because that'd be awesome. But furthermore, if I had to give a general recommendation on A Private Affair, I did find it a little bit unengaging, a little bit boring. So I can't say I necessarily recommend it, but, it's worth a read if you're interested, I would say, maybe. And it's a pretty short book, so I wouldn't say it's necessarily something, it's not like the Count of Monte Cristo, so it's not too long, really. So you could probably read it in a day. But yeah, that is what I wanted to discuss. I know I definitely talk a lot. I fumble on my words. I've been trying to get better at not using filler words during videos I make. So I hope I got better at that, but I'm going to be editing this. So if I didn't, well, I apologize. Overall, yeah. Thank you for watching. I really hope to do another book review. The books I read after this the first one was Star by Yukio Mishima. I finished that early January. And the book I'm currently reading now is The Feast by Margaret Kennedy. And both were very interesting books, very, very interesting. And I hope to review them soon. I definitely want to review Star because it's a shorter book and I feel like I could make a quick video on that. But yeah, thank you for watching.